are demons.
Not enough pain.
What's up YouTube? After a hot minute, it's Kale Rien back with another video, and I'm here today to talk about why I'm back with a new video and why I haven't been making videos very much since I started and ended in the late part of 2017 and early part of 2018. So we're going to talk about PC hardware. My last computer, the one I was streaming on and building YouTube videos on before, was a 7-year-old pretty awesome machine. There was a good windfall I got from, well, my ex-fiance had, which is, again, not a situation I'm going to talk about on video. But it was a situation that allowed me to get a pretty great system. I ended up getting an EVGA classified SR2 motherboard, which has dual sockets for the Xeons of the time based on the first-gen Core i7 hardware from Intel. So they were pretty great systems. It had like triple channel memory per CPU. So I was able to build up like a 12-core, 24-thread system with 24 gigs of RAM. And I went through various video cards. I started with a triple Crossfire with 3 Radeon HD 6970s, which were great cards, but multi-GPU in general sucks. Don't do it. Crossfire literally never worked for me in any meaningful way. And every time I played with it on, I might get really good frame rates, but I'd have like awful performance issues of other sorts. I played WoW with it once, and I remember flying over Stormwind and the buildings were disappearing. It was really weird. So, wouldn't recommend it, but I went from the 3 cards to a single card, and then I went from the single Radeon HD 6970 to a single GeForce GTX 680 when that came out. And then I went from that after a unfortunate water cooling incident with a Corsair H80i, one of the first gen ones, which had shitty tubing that looked like a plastic straw from a convenience store, like that little ribbed, like weird shit. So it leaked on my graphics card. One of them did. So I ended up having to get new coolers, and then at the same time I just got a GeForce GTX 970, which is basically the system I was using all the way up until about a month ago today. I'm filming this on August 11th, got the new system July 11th. So there were lots of weird issues from having a system for 7 years, basically because it had been upgraded over the years. It started with Windows 7 Pro. I can't remember if it was Pro or Enterprise. There were a lot of weird flavors of Windows 7, but I had to buy like a special one because it needed support for a dual socket motherboard. But other than that, it worked really great. And then I upgraded to Windows 8 when that came out. I upgraded to Windows 8.1 when that free upgrade was offered. And then I took the free offer to go to Windows 10, which I used ever since. I'd done a lot of software cleanup. I changed boot drives at least once. I had other little upgrades throughout the years, but for all my efforts to maintain that old system, it was starting to show its age. I was getting lots of weird driver lockups. I came back once where I left it on for a render, and it had like, not like locked up, but it looks like it tried to update and reboot and then didn't find the boot drive. Just a lot of weird issues. So it was starting to affect my ability to stream. I was having to cap at 30 FPS. I was having to play at 720p settings. I was having to stream at low resolution. Some of that was my internet connection because I had a really shitty 100 megabit up and 5 megabit, or no, 100 megabit down and 5 megabits up. If it was 100 up, that would have solved all my problems. So yeah, it just wasn't a great experience for streaming. The system was only putting out 30 FPS because I was having to frame cap it to make sure everything was nice and steady. Which wasn't great. I wasn't a big fan of how it was working. Video renders were taking forever. I wasn't really getting the quality I wanted out of anything. And then my gameplay experience was slowly starting to degrade in games. WoW, still being the game I play the most, had sort of the worst end of it. Whereas the graphics got more high fidelity over the years, they just got harder and harder to maintain. During Legion, when I would go to Broken Shore to do world quests at that beach with all the fire elementals, it would often throttle my GPU up to max temperature just to render the particle effects for the fire elementals. It was pretty ridiculous. So I decided 7 years was more than long enough. It's the longest as an adult I've ever been with one computer. I used to be a pretty frequent upgrader until I got the classified SR2 system. I upgraded about every 18 months on average to a completely new system. And then maybe about 6 months in, some major piece of hardware would change. Like the first system I built for myself in 2007 was a Core 2 Duo E6300, and then when the Core 2 quad core processors came out, I ended up getting one of those to replace the Duo with. And then eventually I got the first gen Core i7, and then I replaced the video card in that, and then finally I got the classified SR2 system. And other than swapping out the video cards, first in 2012 to the GTX 680, and then a second time in 2015 to the GTX 970. Short of that, and a couple of other small upgrades, like adding one of those Killer Nick cards, which, by the way, don't really do anything. Don't spend your money on one, which would be hard to do. They don't really exist anymore anyways. But yeah, so other than small upgrades like that, I kind of had the same system for 7 years. And I had the most recent incarnation of it for the better part of about 3.5 years. Which again, even on its own, is still about the longest I've had any single configuration of hardware. So it was time for an upgrade. It was well overdue. So in December, when I started streaming and doing video rendering for YouTube, I made a decision that I was going to upgrade my system at last and get a fresh new platform. And then in March, I changed jobs, so I had to put it off, because originally my plan was to have it built in March. And I actually bought some hardware back in January. I bought a case, I bought a hard drive and an SSD, and then a power supply. And then I just wasn't able to use it because the money wasn't going to be there for the system for another few months. And then it also turned out that some of the research I did on the platform I wanted didn't work out so well. I bought a RAM kit of DDR4 2400, planning to use a Ryzen CPU, and I hadn't read anything about how you need faster speed memory for Ryzen. Well, needs a strong word, but if you get up to DDR4 3200 on a Ryzen, it works way better in terms of overall performance. So I ended up, kind of pausing, and then finally, a month ago, back in July, I was able to get this. And this is what I've been playing with for the last month. So I'm here to kind of regale you with tales of the fun and not so fun experiences I had. But first of all, we'll go through the hardware real quick. CPU is my grand return to Ryzen after a decade on Intel, or return to AMD, not Ryzen. They didn't have Ryzen a decade ago. Anyways, so I have a Ryzen 7 2700X in there. It's running at stock settings with all the precision boost and XFR stuff turned on. I am a fan of overclocking. I do like pushing a system to max performance, but a lot of reviews and a lot of the stuff I've read about Ryzen suggests that the auto overclocking that those features enable actually works better for the most part than just doing it on your own does. And realistically, for the most part in my usage, I'm not using it for video rendering so much that I would need to do like an all-core overclock to 4.2 gigahertz. So letting it do its own overclocking and sometimes allowing like single core to go 4.3, and then for video rendering having everything pegged at like 3.9 gigahertz is more than fine. I haven't had any issues performance-wise with it. It's been a fantastic purchase. If you're on the fence about going back to AMD, or trying to kind of think through the stigma of how AMD is supposed to be like the cheap brand that nobody wants, Ryzen is well worth your time. I'll say that for sure. And that's nothing against Intel. I actually could have gotten better gaming performance if I had bought a Core i7 8700K. However, video rendering performance and the other stuff would have been down. And the other thing too is that the Core i7 8700K has maybe a 10% performance uplift over Ryzen 7 2700X for gaming, but it costs over 10% more money. So in the end, I was like, that's a good compromise. I'm going to go with Ryzen. The motherboard I got is an Asus Crosshair 7 Hero Wi-Fi. It's able to merge the Wi-Fi and the wired networking in sort of a weird like packet determination scheme. I don't know what that's actually called. It basically tries to bridge the connections. It works pretty well. I've been using that for a while now and I haven't had any issues. I really like the performance it gives me as far as a good motherboard to enable Precision Boost 2 and XFR 2 to really stretch their legs. It's a fantastic setup for that. I've had no problems with the motherboard, short of a funny software issue, which I'll talk about towards the end of the video, so stay tuned for that. Memory-wise, I got 32 gigs of G.Skill Trident Z RGB memory. It is DDR4 3200 with the relaxed timings. Cast latency is 16 instead of the 14 that's more popular. I didn't find it worth paying like an extra $50 for the cast latency 14 stuff. Because memory prices are still stupid right now. I really like the kit. The RGB effect is great. The only thing is that it had a lot of weirdness when using ASUS AuraSync, in that sometimes it wouldn't sync up. In fact, a lot of times it wouldn't sync up. So I was able to set the color through AuraSync exactly once, and then it stopped working that way, and it would just do the RGB rainbow puke effect every time I turned on the system after that. So I ended up going and getting the G.Skill software to just adjust the memory, but then that would conflict with AuraSync and crash. So I finally had to get rid of AuraSync, which was fine because I set my motherboard up with the colors and such I wanted, and I haven't changed them since, and it hasn't changed on its own even with multiple BIOS flashes, so it's been pretty good so far. And now I don't have any crashes when the software tries to conflict, and I don't have weird color mismatch, which is really the most important part. In terms of the video card, I have an EVGA GeForce GTX 1080 Ti. It's the SC2 hybrid model. So the SC2 is sort of their slightly better than stock version of the GeForce GTX 1080 Ti. It's overclocked slightly over the sort of stock settings, and it has a slightly higher boost clock and GPU boost. So it pretty regularly hits almost 2 gigahertz core clock, which is fantastic. But the hybrid part means that it has a built-in all-in-one liquid cooler, which has worked really, really well. The EVGA model is one of the best of those because in addition to cooling the GPU, it also has a memory cold plate block that interacts with the actual pump, so it cools your memory with liquid as well. Although it doesn't have direct contact, and the cold plate for the memory doesn't have a whole lot of surface area, it actually still works pretty well. The only downside is that it slightly increases your reported GPU temperatures, but even at max load on this, the hardest I've pushed this GPU is maybe 60 degrees in Celsius, not Fahrenheit. That'd be great if it was Fahrenheit. And that's a vast improvement over my GTX 970, which in Broken Shore would hit 80 degrees and then throttle. So yeah, well worth it. And I got a good deal on it, so it was just as the GPU madness was ending. So I got it for its actual original sticker price, which actually doesn't sound like all that good of a deal, but it is actually pretty decent. I don't feel like I lost out on it, even though I'm hearing that new gen cards are probably going to be announced this month. The first gen of a new generation or the first like iteration of those cards from NVIDIA is usually not worth getting if you have the current gen, so I'm not too worried about it. In 2 years, I can look at getting a 2080 Ti or 1180 Ti or whatever they end up launching. In terms of other hardware, storage-wise, I've got 5 drives in here. My main boot drive and what I run WoW and Final Fantasy XIV and all my recording stuff off of is a Samsung 970 EVO. It is an NVMe SSD plugged directly into my motherboard, and its performance is great. The one thing I would caution you about with an NVMe drive is that you may be expecting the performance to be substantially better than it ends up, because you'll read the advertised sticker ratings of 3 gigabyte per second read speeds and 2 gigabyte per second write speeds, and it's true that it can hit those levels of performance a decent amount of times, but what you'll be surprised to find out if you haven't really tested it or read anything about it is that in a lot of situations where you would expect to see big performance gains, it doesn't really end up mattering that much. WoW, for example, I figured, okay, great, it can read 3 gigs a second. WoW only puts about 2 gigs into system RAM, so awesome, I can load WoW in 1 second. Well, loading isn't really the bottleneck there. It's the servers, it's network connections, it's all the other shit that goes on that isn't loading the game data locally from your system. Now, if you're going to do like a lot of PvP or a lot of instance zone-ins where you're going to be constantly at loading screens, it still adds up to a slightly better experience, but I would probably recommend still going with a serial ATA SSD for the time being. The amount of additional performance you get, the amount of cut down load screens and boot times and all that, doesn't really add up to as much as you would expect given the price difference. So it's good. Like, I'm glad I bought it. I don't regret buying it, but I would say that it didn't perform to my expectations, and that's not a problem with the drive. I don't want to say that I'm like unhappy or anything at all. I'm very happy with it because I can also use it as a scratch disk for video rendering, and that's what I've been doing. But it's not going to quite get you where you want to go in terms of that raw performance. The other drives are a little less exciting and have a little less to talk about. I have two Samsung 850 EVO SSDs, 500 gigs SATA drives. They're just in there for storage for video projects and also storage for other projects like my 3D models that I work on in SketchUp. They work really excellently off that. They load super fast. There's no problems with that. And then my bulk storage is courtesy of two 5 terabyte Toshiba 7200 RPM mechanical hard drives. They work great. There's actually really fast for mechanical drives, but really fast for mechanical drives means about 150 megs a second of read and maybe 40 or 50 megabytes a second of write. I think when I did user benchmark, it peaked at like 70 megs write, which is pretty damn good for a mechanical drive, but you know, you're not really buying those for their performance as much as just putting all the stuff that doesn't matter that much in terms of performance on it and using it to store stuff. So yeah, that's in there. The case I have right here is the Lian PC011 Dynamic. It's a really excellent tempered glass case with both a front and a side panel that have this nice tempered glass look. They use these internal mounting pegs, and only screws are on this top panel at the back here. So the tempered glass mounts with no screws, no warts on the side that you have to worry about. They just kind of slide in from the top. It works really, really well. It's a sturdy mounting mechanism. I've taken it apart a bunch of times, and it's worked great. What else did I put in there? There's an EVGA 750 watt gold rated power supply. It works great. There's not much more to say there. And then in terms of bling, I have a bunch of Cooler Master Air RGB 120mm fans. They're all hooked up to Cooler Master's RGB controllers. They're all the airflow style except for 3 at the top here, which are air pressure. And they work really, really well. They have a great glow. They're pretty quiet. I have them running at max all the time because they just, at max speed, they don't get that loud. And a lot of times I'll be gaming with like a headset on, or my speakers are loud enough that it's just fine. No problems there. The Ryzen 7 2700X is being cooled by an NZXT Kraken X72 360mm radiator water cooler. I went the all-in-one approach because building an open loop scares the shit out of me. And I already had a closed loop cooler break on me, so I would rather have someone else be liable for that and be able to pester somebody else if it like breaks down early and kills my hardware. And the NZXT Kraken brand, as far as NZXT, I see good things about their build quality. I know that the BlizzCon demo systems last year had Krakens in them. I like the infinity mirror effect. It's more RGB, shit for me to put in there, which I kind of went overboard on, but hey. And then, yeah, RGB, speaking of which, I also have a Corsair Lighting Node Pro with some light strips here to illuminate the side panels. I'm doing that because I have an Alliance decal on this one, and then I have a WoW logo on the front one, which works really great. In terms of peripherals, I brought over pretty much all of my existing stuff. So I have a G810 Orion keyboard from Logitech, and I have the G502 Proteus Spectrum gaming mouse, and then I have the Logitech G13 gamepad for MMO gameplay, so I don't have to move around too much for hotkeys. Works really great. The only other upgrade I did is I went down from my 3 Dell 2711 monitors, which were 2560 by 1440, to one of those Dells, which is over here behind the camera. And then my main monitor is now an Asus ROG Strix 35. It's like an XG35V. Monitors need better names, I swear. But it is an ultra-wide monitor, so it is 3440 by 1440. The resolution is great. You can see it in my videos here now. It enabled me, coupled with the hardware improvements of just having a much beefier system, it's allowed me to do 4K for YouTube. And then that, coupled with the upgrades to my internet connectivity, are going to allow me to stream to Twitch at 1080p max bitrate for what they'll allow, which is about 6 megabits. So I'm really excited to start getting into streaming again. I did do a test stream a few nights ago. It was like 3 weeks ago at this point, I think. And it's worked really well. I was really happy with the end result of that. I didn't have any dropped frames because the CPU was on top of it. The main reason I went with Ryzen over a Core i7-8700K is because those extra physical CPU cores do a lot of work. I can do software encoding on my CPU while playing games and have next to no performance hit. It's excellent. I'm encoding a 4K video while playing WoW to give this video something other than my face to look at. And it's working excellently, just as well as it would without the video going. There is a bit of a performance hit, but nowhere near what you would expect. So it's pretty great. You can play and stream, you can play and encode, everything works great. It also allowed me, or encouraged me, to upgrade to the newest, to Adobe Creative Cloud rather than the copy of CS5.5 I've been using for God knows how long now. And the best thing about that is that with a 4K video, it means I can do CUDA accelerated rendering, so I can use my CPU and my GPU, which cuts my render times way down, even though it upped the complexity by a lot. I'm going from taking 2 hours on average to render like a 15-minute 1080p clip at it was like 8 megabits a second, to taking 30 minutes to render a 4K clip at 60 megabits per second, and about the same amount of time as far as the duration of the video. It works amazingly well. And the other nice thing about being able to do 4K for YouTube is that it allows me to have WoW at native resolution and then stretched out a little bit just to fit the window with within the video, so there's no downscaling, so you don't have any weird like artifacts from that. So it works really, really well. I'm really happy with the new system overall. I'm excited to get back into streaming. But let's talk a little bit about why I haven't done it earlier. Is that building this system was not a painless endeavor. First of all, it took me a lot longer than I would care to admit to actually assemble everything. I got all the hardware on the night of July 11th and spent about 5 hours putting everything together. I had already had the case and the power supply for a while before, so I did try to pre-install the power supply and get cables routed and do some of that work in advance. It didn't really save me a whole lot of time though. Mounting the cooler was a bit of a pain in the ass, more than I expected. Water coolers are a lot easier to mount, especially these all-in-ones, because you have a lot less to do on the CPU socket compared to an air cooler. But mounting a 360 millimeter radiator to your case fucking sucks. NZXT's actually sucks a little worse than this, because the Corsair units I had before, even though they were single 120s, the fans that were included by default had threading in them so that you could put a normal fan screw in them. So you could, when you were mounting it, at least mount like do diagonal corners with the actual radiator screws, and then do fan screws on the other corners. But you could do the fan screws initially so that you could secure the fan, and then you could run the radiator screws through on the other corners to mount the radiator, so you didn't have to sit there and hold it and try to screw in all four. No, NZXT's fans that are on the top of the radiator here, because I'm doing a push-pull config, they have no threading on the inside. They're just straight rubber all the way through. And the radiator fan screws will not penetrate that, as far as I could tell. I tried. Maybe I didn't try hard enough, but it didn't work. So, yeah, mounting it was kind of a pain in the ass. I'm not going to lie. It was actually much easier to mount the video card radiator, which is over here on the side of the case because of the Lee & Lee's layout, which I really actually like. It's fantastic. I love this case. It's so good. Yeah, so I expect that videos will be coming more frequently. But the other big issue, that was a weird, I'm going to leave that in. Fuck it. The other weird thing I ran into with this system is that I had a couple of weird power bug issues that kind of illustrate one of the things that I think scares a lot of people from PC building, but shouldn't, because there are ways of figuring them out. So I alluded earlier to the fact that the Crosshair 7 Hero motherboard was really great, except for one weird thing it did. Well, when I first built the system, the very first day I had it, when I got it all built and running, I did log into WoW, and I went through and soloed Blackrock Foundry on my Demon Hunter, as I normally do, every week, trying to get that damn mount. And when I was fighting Blackhand, I got to phase 3, and then my system rebooted, just randomly in the middle of it. I didn't know why, I didn't know what happened. The Windows system log reported a kernel power error, which I didn't know what that was. I'd never run into it before. So I had to Google it, and I found out that it meant that the system basically just shut down unexpectedly. For usually what it meant is power failure, which usually would imply that your power supply is bad. Well, I adjusted a bunch of settings for power, and it worked fine for a pretty good while. It went about 2 weeks without a single crash, and I even did like a couple stress tests, did a couple of like really long gaming sessions, let the water coolers both soak up a lot of heat over a long period of time, you know, playing WoW for a few hours at a sitting to really get a lot of heat into the system. And yeah, it was working fine. And then finally I decided to do a full system AIDA64 stress test, including the GPU. And the first time I was able to do it successfully and exit out of the test and continue using the system normally. But then I did it again, and the system crashed. And this time what it did is it powered off, and it did not restart. And not only that, but I had to flip the switch on the power supply to get power back to the motherboard to even allow me to turn it back on. Because when it crashed like this, it did it so hard that if I hit the power button right after, it would not turn on. So this happened at another time, but this time it happened randomly after that first crash like that, when I was just goofing around with the system. I wasn't even in a game. I was just kind of looking at different settings, trying to figure out what was going on. And it turns out, of all the things in the world, that there's a very weird software conflict on the Crosshair 7 Hero with ASUS's AI Fan, or AI Suite 3, which is like their fan control software, and the Corsair Link software that my LED strips are controlled by. So, yeah, having both sets of software up and running would sometimes just cause your system to do that. And not only was it not a power supply failure, it wasn't really any failure. The hardware, just like for whatever reason, that combination of software hard locked. And sure enough, I installed all the ASUS software because I wasn't really using the software fan control anyways. I have them all maxed out in the BIOS, and the only settings, the fans that aren't, are the ones tied to the water coolers, which use their own regulation mechanisms that are built in through liquid temperature. So doesn't really matter. Didn't need the software. Uninstalled it, and then ran several AIDA64 stress tests, and sure enough, it's fine. Never had a problem since. But it's fucking weird. And that's one of the things that you have to look forward to about PC building, is sometimes shit's not going to work. But oftentimes there's like really weird reasons why that is. And I would have never figured that out if it weren't for overclockers.net. I had gone to their forum. They had a whole thread on this motherboard that included one of the ASUS guys in product management, and pointed out that they had been able to replicate this bug in-house, that if they were using their fan software, it worked fine. If they installed Corsair Link to the same test bench, it would fail. Every time. They were able to replicate it immediately. So, what do you know? It's good news, because I was getting real worried that I was going to have to like RMA my power supply with EVGA, which EVGA, to their credit, has an excellent cross-shipping program. You just have to pay the cost of the replacement as collateral, and then you get refunded it once they get your power supply back in. So I was about to do that because EVGA, again, like I can't say enough good things about their warranty process. You get currently for the model I bought, the Supernova P3 or G3, you get a 12-year warranty, which is pretty amazing in terms of technology. There are not a lot of things out there that get, especially like daily use components that are subject to, you know, wear and tear through electrical abuse, like a power supply, that get that long of a warranty. So kudos to them. I was about ready to RMA it, and then I read up on the bug, and I was able to fix it. Thank God. So here we are now, and now a month of burning in this system. Battle for Azeroth launches in a couple of days, and I am ready to get back into video creation. I'm very excited to start making videos again. I'm very excited to stream again. One of the things I'm most looking forward to is I am going to try to do a launch day stream for Battle for Azeroth until I hit 120. I'm not quite sure of the timing yet because, unfortunately, since I did start a new job in the spring, I don't have a whole lot of paid time off. So Monday the 13th, the actual launch day for it, I am going to be working until the game has been out for 2 hours technically. And then I'm going to come home and eat dinner and start leveling. So I'll probably do a stream there. I'm not under any illusion that I'm going to overnight it or anything. I'm probably going to go to sleep at some point. And then I'll probably pick up and I'll have an actual August 14th launch day stream as soon as I wake up and get you know, breakfast and a workout in, and then I will probably start streaming until I hit 120, do some heroics, hopefully do some mythics. I am planning on playing Kael Rien through Battle for Azeroth. Vengeance Demon Hunter looks amazing. I got to play Vengeance on Alpha, and I really enjoyed it. Even after GCD, I actually really like the spec still. So it's great fun. It's potent in most tank settings, so I'm really excited to get back into raid tanking. I'm really excited to level some characters. My plans are already to level both sides. I want to level my Demon Hunter first, since that's going to be my raid main, and I want to start, you know, even though I've got a few weeks before Old Year opens, it's going to be worth the time to level up, get my gear, you know, as good as I can get it, and go from there. So yeah, that's the plan. There will be a lot more videos coming. I'll be talking about each of the zones. We'll be doing lore breakdowns. I'm going to have some more WoW content up hopefully this weekend, even before the expansion launches. But with Battle for Azeroth, I'm going to resume putting out content on a regular basis. I'm not sure that I'm going to be doing, you know, 7 videos a week yet, but I do plan on getting up to that over time. So yeah, stay tuned for that. I hope you enjoyed this video. It's a bit of a long one. You can already see in XSplit that I've got almost 17 gigs of 4K footage, which is probably about average for how long I've been babbling about my PCs. So yeah, thank you again for watching. If you made it all the way here, leave a comment. Let me know what you thought. I'm very excited to start sharing more videos with you all. And until the next one, take care, and I'll see you then.
Thank you. Back into the fight.